Yeah, this tank's a complete mess. So I recently completed this side of the hybrid, and there is a video on it uploaded on the channel already. But seeing as I recently completed this, I can actually now shift my attention back to this old thing, which looks like a complete mess. You can see the things that I've initially had in the tank are no longer there. The moss wall has completely collapsed up here, and there's this open gap which doesn't look good. Additionally, the foreground is also covered in moss because I've just let it grow, and it's also rather unsightly as well. The sand that is underneath is no longer visible, and it doesn't look good as well. So in this video, I want to get rid of all of the things that doesn't look good and kind of fix the mistakes I've made. It's not going to be a complete rescape because I do still want to keep the elements from before. I'm just gonna give it a much enhanced look for now. So the way I'm going to do this first is in order to actually get down and remove all of the things, I have to first get rid of all the floating plants. But in case there are some shrimp in there that have attached themselves to the floating plants, when I get them out, I will fill this bucket with some water, and then I will place all of the moss and all the floating plants in there, and that way all of the animals are safe and they can be added back in the tank once everything has been done. But yeah, step one, get rid of all the floating plants and the moss at the bottom, and then we'll kind of work from there. Okay, so the moss at the bottom here has now been taken out and cleared. And I've also had to change my shirt because the other one had too much of a glare in the glass. But the next thing that I want to do is actually completely dismantle the moss wall here, because all of the epiphytes that I have on it already, I do want to reattach them and see if I can improve on the original concept. So I'm going to take all of the moss that you can see here out, as well as the epiphyte plants, and then kind of starting over from this area. The moss wall. As you can see here, the footage is very blurry, and that's because my camera accidentally tilted while I was doing it, so I've had to zoom in quite a lot to even just get some of it visible. So yeah, let's just skip to the part where I actually have dismantled the moss wall. Okay, so the moss wall has now been completely dismantled, and not much is actually left in there. I've also gone ahead and slowed down the flow on the filter because it just pushed up debris everywhere and it just came into the flow of the camera, and it didn't really look good. So it's also had some time to settle. And actually another reason why I wanted to do this kind of, not exactly a rescape, but kind of taking it all out and putting it back up again, is also because I never saw the shrimp in here, and that's one of the things that I really did enjoy initially, is to look at all the shrimp in the tank. But since all of the moss grew at the front and they've been able to hide in the moss wall as well, I rarely actually saw them. So now that I'll be able to replace the substrate and build the moss wall again, hopefully I'll be able to see them a lot more. So what I'm going to do now is actually build the moss wall back up again, and I am going to do that by taking some of the moss that you see here. I'm going to rip it into a bit smaller pieces and kind of break it up, and then I'm going to build it again by sticking it in between the small holes that you can see in the egg crates in here. Okay, so all of the moss is now back onto the wall, as you can see here. And the next thing that I want to do is add all of the epiphytes back. And the epiphytes that I have are these small Anubias nana petite, and also some of this Bucephalandra ketagang. So I'm just gonna glue them in places that I see fit here on top of the moss, and then it should stay in place, and then in about 5 or 6 months I will have to do all of this trimming again, but that's fine. So the moss ball's actually now done. I do still have some more epiphytes left, but I'm actually happy with the amount of Anubias and Bucephalandra on here now. So I'm not gonna add any more, I'm gonna keep them for something else. Now, the last thing that I want to do is take some of this hydrocoated tripartita that we have here and actually add this into the moss wall as well, because I think it'll grow nicely in with everything else, and it will look good with some of these kind of textured leaves over here as well. I'm actually quite happy with how it looks with the hydrocoated. I think it actually blends in very well, as I had hoped. And now we can move on to the next thing, and that is the hardscape behind and the rotala stems here in the back. I'm not quite happy. I think there's a lot of space between them, and I do want them to be a lot bushier, but in order to get to that point I need to remove the large rock, the large cereal stone in the middle, and then I'll be able to trim the plants because they also do need it, and then I'll be able to replant the stems once again. So that's what's next. So it's actually been about 2 weeks now since I last touched the tanks, and not much have changed really. I've gotten ahead off camera and added some more of the rotala stems at the back, because the ones that went there didn't really look that good. And so now it looks much better, and yeah, the red pop is a lot more apparent now than it was before. But now I'll just continue from where I left off. So take the rock and the moss out, and then we work from there with getting the new substrate in and making the last final touches. And the best part about all of this is that none of it will go to waste. All of the epiphytes and the moss that I am not using now will go to another project that I am working on. All right, so with that taken care of, we now move on to the next step, which is to siphon out all of the old sand in the foreground. The look now is not really that appealing. There's a lot of gunk that has collected in the foreground. and I do want to remove it as well. But the sand that will come in is actually very light as well. So in order for that to look more natural and nice, that will also take some time. But that is part of the process. Okay, so this is the current look. Yeah, all of the sand of the foreground, or the worst parts of it, at least at the front of the glass, has been removed. So now we can actually put some new sand at the top to cover it, and hopefully it'll look a lot nicer then. So now we can move on to the last things that I want to do for the tank. Before we get the rock back in place, I do want to kind of do some other things with the foreground. The Hydrocotyl tripetita in the tank next door is growing incredibly well. So I do want to take this clump right here and then just put it in here at the foreground of the tank, kind of wedge it in between the rocks, and it should stay put there. So hopefully this will just, yeah, stay here and grow, and it will look incredible, I think, in time. It looks good here, so let it stay there and see how it grows there. And in the tank next door as well, there are also these amazing pieces of Helanthium tenellum green. And I think they could actually do a lot for this tank as well in behind the rocks here at the front, because it is actually quite bare at the moment. So by placing these in, and hopefully they'll spread and they'll grow in here as well, that they can contribute to having a little prettier carpet than what I initially intended with the hair grass, which haven't really taken off. And okay, now to the next step, which are taking these epiphytes, Anubias and Bucephalandra, and putting them into the rocks here at the foreground. Yeah, I'm just gonna take them in, see if I can wedge them in the different places without using glue, and if that doesn't work, well then I'll have to use some glue to put them on. And then one of the final things is to add the moss back as well. Initially I had them glued onto these pieces of slate here, and yeah, it just grew abnormally big. So I've trimmed it back a little so it's not as big, and then it should look a lot better in its original place than it did before. And in this way as well, the foreground is not entirely bare, entirely. I like that the moss can kind of come in and break up all of the sand of the foreground, so it gives it a different look and some different textures as well. And now the last thing that we need to do for today is to add the big rock back in. And as I said earlier, all of the moss and the epiphytes that I'm not putting back in now, they will go to another project, which I'm working on simultaneously with this one. So nothing will go to waste and everything will be used. So yeah, that is what I wanted to do for today, and already I can actually see a lot more shrimp in the foreground than I could previously, so that is a good sign. I am also, however, just gonna give the fish a quick feed. And hopefully that will be able to lure some of the shrimp to the foreground as well that I can use. But yeah, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know what you think both of how it looks now, but also if you enjoy these kind of more maintenance focused videos. I know they are, for me, fun to make as well, and it's always nice to see an updated version of how a tank is growing and looking over time as well. But yeah, anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. There is a lot more exciting projects to come to the channel, so please, if you did like the video and would like to see more, please do consider subscribing.